March 24, 1999, Kosovo War. What happens when justice demands fire, and that fire refuses to die even after the smoke clears? When the world looked away from the Balkans, General Wesley Clark stepped into the shadows of one of Europe's darkest hours as the supreme Allied commander of NATO. The Kosovo War was not just another battlefield. It was a collision between humanity and horror. On the night of March 24, 1999, under skies choked with storm clouds and tension, Clark authorized Operation Allied Force, the first major military campaign in NATO's history. The goal was clear: stop the Serbian forces from carrying out ethnic cleansing against Kosovar Albanians. But clarity in war is an illusion. What followed was 78 days of chaos that blurred the lines between victory and vengeance. Clark commanded over a vast coalition of nations, each one armed with different agendas and fears, yet united under his steady leadership. As the first missiles sliced through the night sky, their trails glowed like veins of molten light against the blackness of Yugoslavia, illuminating cities that trembled beneath. To many, it looked like justice. To those on the ground, it sounded like hell. For General Clark, this was more than a mission. It was a test of conscience. Every morning, his situation reports were soaked in blood and uncertainty. The enemy hid among civilians. The terrain twisted truth into confusion, and every airstrike carried the weight of moral consequence. He watched as the war transformed from a strategic operation into a nightmare of human suffering. Entire villages disappeared under smoke. Bridges crumbled with echoes that seemed to last forever. In one haunting moment, a convoy believed to be carrying Serbian forces was struck from above, only to reveal civilians beneath the flames, a mistake that Clark would remember for the rest of his life. He described later how the faces of those innocent victims haunted him, surfacing in the silence after every mission briefing. Still, he had to press forward, for pulling back meant allowing genocide to spread like a disease. The horror reached a fever pitch when reports of massacres poured in, families executed in cold blood, children's cries swallowed by the roar of tanks, and refugees freezing in the mountains, hunted by forces that refused mercy. And NATO's intelligence maps became maps of grief. Red marks for bomb targets, black marks for massacres, and gray for the unknown. Each mark was a story Clark would never forget. The war's horror wasn't only in the destruction, but in the waiting, the dreadful quiet before a siren, the moment between decision and devastation. Pilots described flying through storms so violent their instruments screamed. Soldiers on the ground spoke of nights when even the wind sounded like it was morning. Clark bore their voices like ghosts chained to his command desk. He never slept more than an hour at a time. Even in those brief moments, the echoes of explosions filled his dreams. Then came the night that tested everything. A U.S. F-117 stealth bomber, the pride of America's air fleet, was shot down near Belgrade, its wreckage falling into enemy territory. The mission to rescue the pilot became a nightmare of stealth and speed. Clark personally oversaw the operation from his command post, eyes locked on flickering satellite feeds while his men slipped past enemy patrols under cover of thunder and darkness. Hours stretched into eternities. The radio crackled with tense whispers, coordinates, and prayers. When the coded phrase "package recovered" finally broke through the static, Clark allowed himself a single breath of relief. The pilot was alive. Against all odds, they had pulled a man from the jaws of death. Yet even that victory carried a shadow. The realization that every success in war is paid for by someone else's suffering. As weeks turned into months, NATO's campaign intensified. By June 1999, after relentless bombing and global pressure, Serbian forces began to withdraw from Kosovo. The world called it a victory, but for Wesley Clark, stepping into Kosovo after the conflict felt like walking through the ruins of humanity. The air was heavy with the stench of burnt fuel and the silence of unburied memories. Soldiers moved through towns where houses were still smoldering, their walls marked with bullet holes and handprints of those who tried to hide. In the forests, graves were shallow and unmarked, filled with stories no one would ever tell. Clark looked into the eyes of children who had seen more in a few months than most soldiers in a lifetime. It was there that the reality of modern warfare revealed itself. Technology could win battles, but it could not erase horror. Despite his triumph, controversy followed Clark like a shadow. Some leaders questioned his aggressive strategies. Others accused him of pushing NATO's limits too far. But Clark defended every decision with conviction, believing that inaction would have written an even darker chapter in European history. He was not a man drunk on power, but one burdened by purpose, a soldier who saw war not as glory, but as a necessary evil carved from human failure. His command during the Kosovo War redefined NATO and marked one of the first humanitarian interventions of the modern age, a war fought not for territory, but for lives. As the dust settled and refugees began to return to their shattered homes, Clark stood among the ruins of Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, and listened to the eerie stillness. The sun was rising, but the light felt cold. Reporters asked if the war had been worth it. He looked at the burned-out buildings, the frightened faces peeking from behind broken windows, and said quietly, "History will answer that." To this day, the Kosovo War remains both a symbol of courage and a reminder of the terrible price of intervention. The horror of what Clark witnessed, the burning skies, the trembling earth, the faces of the innocent, stayed with him long after the last plane returned home.